Get down on your knees and lick it. I said lick it clean. The words echoed through Terminal C of Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, and every head in the crowded boarding area turned to watch. Marcus Whitmore, the airport's operations manager, stood over a small puddle of spilled coffee near Gate 47, his expensive Italian shoes just inches from the liquid spreading across the polished floor. His finger pointed down at the mess, then at the black woman in a custodial uniform kneeling beside her cleaning cart. I don't pay you people to stand around, Marcus continued, loud enough for the businessmen at the gate, the families waiting to board, the airport staff pretending not to stare. I pay you to keep this place spotless, so if you spilled it, you clean it. With your tongue if that's what it takes to teach you some respect. The woman looked up at him, her dark eyes steady and calm in a way that should have warned him. But Marcus Whitmore had spent 15 years building his little empire within the airport's private management company, and he'd long ago stopped seeing custodians as people who might surprise him. Sir, I didn't spill this coffee, she said quietly, her voice carrying the kind of patience that comes from having this conversation too many times before. I was just arriving to clean it when you... Did I ask for excuses? Marcus cut her off. A few passengers pulled out their phones. In 2024, everything was recorded. But Marcus had never cared about that before. His uncle sat on the airport authority board. His family had connections that ran deep through Atlanta's old money networks. What was some viral video going to do to him that his lawyers couldn't fix? The woman's name tag read Lily in faded plastic letters. She was maybe 35, with natural hair pulled back in a simple bun. The kind of woman Marcus's type walked past every day without a second glance. Just another invisible worker in the machinery that kept the world's busiest airport running. What Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know because he'd never bothered to really look at the people he managed, was that Lily had a very different name tag in her locker. The real one. The one that read Federal Aviation Administration, Health and Safety Inspector. My name is Lily Santos, and 6 weeks ago I walked into this airport wearing a wire, carrying fake references, and a mission to document the systematic health code violations that 3 whistleblowers had risked their jobs to report. The FAA had received complaints about deliberately ignored sanitation failures, falsified inspection reports, and evidence that Hartsfield's private management company was cutting corners that could cost lives. They needed someone on the inside. Someone who could see what inspectors in suits and clipboards would never be shown. So I became invisible. I became exactly what people like Marcus Whitmore expected to see when they looked at a black woman pushing a cleaning cart. And for 6 weeks, I documented everything. The bathrooms that weren't being cleaned to code. The food service areas with broken refrigeration that Marcus's team knew about but didn't fix because repairs cost money. The ventilation systems pumping recycled air that hadn't been serviced in 8 months despite federal requirements. I had photos, video recordings, testimony from terrified workers who'd been threatened into silence. I had enough evidence to shut down sections of this airport and end careers. I had everything I needed. I just needed 7 more days to finish documenting the pattern, to make the case airtight, to ensure that when I walked back into the FAA regional office, the evidence would be undeniable. But Marcus Whitmore, in his $1,000 suit and his cloud of expensive cologne, that couldn't quite mask the stink of his arrogance, was about to make that very complicated. I'm going to count to 5, Marcus said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that bullies use when they think they've cornered someone. And if you're not on your knees cleaning this mess in the way I told you to, you're fired. And I'll make sure you never work in this airport, or any airport again. 1. Passengers were definitely recording now. I could see at least 4 phones pointed our direction. An older black woman in a Delta Airlines uniform, one of the gate agents, caught my eye. Her expression held something between sympathy and warning. She'd seen Marcus do this before. They all had. 2. I could stop this right now. I could pull out my federal credentials, tell him exactly who he was threatening. Watch his face go from smug to terrified in the space of a heartbeat. It would feel good. It would feel really good. But it would also blow my cover. It would warn everyone in the management chain that they were under investigation. Evidence would disappear. Witnesses would be silenced. The bigger case, the pattern of corruption and negligence that put millions of travelers at risk would evaporate. 3. My hand went to the small recording device hidden in my uniform pocket, disguised as an ID badge holder. It was running. It had been running since I clocked in this morning. Every word Marcus was saying, every threat, every witness in this terminal, all of it was being documented. 4. I thought about my daughter Imani, 7 years old, who thought her mama just cleaned floors for a living. Who didn't know that her mother had a master's degree in public health, that she'd spent 10 years investigating some of the most dangerous workplace violations in the country. I thought about what I'd tell her if she asked me why I got down on my knees for a man like Marcus Whitmore. 5. The terminal had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now, waiting to see if I would humiliate myself, if I would fight back, if I would simply walk away. Marcus's hand was already reaching for his radio, ready to call security, ready to make good on his threat. And in that moment, with my heart pounding and my jaw clenched and every instinct screaming at me to stand up and end this man's career right here and now, I made a choice that would change everything. I slowly stood up from where I'd been kneeling beside my cart. I looked Marcus Whitmore directly in his cold, entitled eyes. And I said, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, loud enough for all those recording phones to catch every word. No, it was just one word. 2 letters. But it hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Marcus's face went from satisfied to shocked to dark red with rage in the span of 3 seconds. What did you just say to me? I said, no, sir. I won't be doing that. And I think you know exactly why. His hand shot out and grabbed my arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. Several passengers gasped. The Delta Gate agent reached for her phone. You just made the biggest mistake of your pathetic life, Marcus hissed, yanking me closer. Security! And as 2 airport security officers started making their way through the crowd toward us, as Marcus Whitmore stood there gripping my arm with all the confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences in his entire privileged life, he had no idea that this moment, this public display of exactly the kind of abuse and discrimination the FAA had sent me to document, was being recorded on government equipment. He had no idea that the pathetic custodian he was assaulting in front of witnesses was about to become his worst nightmare. He had no idea that 7 days from now, when I was scheduled to reveal my real identity and present my findings, that timeline had just moved up considerably. And most importantly, Marcus Whitmore had absolutely no idea that sometimes the people you don't even bother to see are the ones who see everything about you. If this story of injustice and power resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because what happened next would expose not just one cruel manager, but an entire system built on the backs of people everyone had been trained to ignore. The security officers, both young men who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, hesitated when they reached Marcus and Lily. The taller one, whose name tag read Rodriguez, looked between his boss and the custodian whose arm Marcus still gripped like she was a criminal. Sir, what's the situation here? Rodriguez asked carefully. The situation, Marcus said, finally releasing Lily's arm and smoothing his suit jacket, is that this employee refused a direct order and showed insubordination in front of passengers. I want her escorted off airport property immediately and her access badge deactivated. I refuse to lick a floor, Lily said calmly, rubbing her arm where Marcus's fingers had dug in. The mark was already darkening to purple. In front of approximately 40 witnesses who I'm sure would be happy to clarify what actually happened here. Rodriguez glanced at the crowd of passengers, many still holding their phones up. His partner, a younger officer named Chen, according to his badge, shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should all step into the office and discuss this privately, Chen suggested, clearly trying to defuse a situation that was already spiraling beyond a simple employee dispute. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. Fine, bring her to my office. And someone clean up this mess before I write up the entire custodial staff. An older Hispanic woman who'd been watching from near the restrooms quickly moved forward with her cart. She wouldn't look at Lily, wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. Just another invisible worker doing her job, terrified of becoming Marcus Whitmore's next target. They walked through the terminal in a procession that felt almost biblical. Marcus in front, radiating fury in his expensive suit. The two security officers flanking Lily like she was dangerous. And Lily herself, walking with her head up, her recording device still running, documenting every second. The administrative offices for the airport's private management company occupied a secure area past the ticket counters. Marcus's office was exactly what you'd expect. Leather furniture, framed photos of himself with local politicians, a window overlooking the runways where planes took off every 90 seconds. On his desk sat a crystal paperweight that probably cost more than Lily's supposed monthly salary as a custodian. "Wait outside," Marcus told the security officers once they were inside. "I'll call you when I'm ready to have her removed from the building." Rodriguez looked uncertain. "Sir, maybe we should—" I said wait outside. Marcus's tone left no room for argument. When the door closed, leaving them alone, Marcus walked around his desk and sat down in his high-backed leather chair. He didn't invite Lily to sit. He let her stand there in her custodial uniform, deliberately making her feel small in his space of power. What Marcus didn't know was that Lily had already documented 3 health code violations just by standing in this office. The ventilation vent above his desk showed visible mold growth. The small refrigerator in the corner where he kept his bottled water was running at the wrong temperature. She could tell by the condensation pattern. And the carpet near the door showed signs of water damage that had never been properly remediated. Her eyes cataloged everything while Marcus pulled out a file from his desk drawer. Lily Santos, he read from what appeared to be her employment file. Hired 6 weeks ago through Temp Staff Solutions. No prior airport experience. References from 2 cleaning companies that I'm guessing my HR department never actually called to verify. He looked up at her with a smile that never reached his eyes. "You want to know what I think?" "I think you're exactly what you look like. Another broke single mother who needs this job more than she needs her pride." "Am I wrong?" Lily said nothing. Just stood there with her hands clasped in front of her, her face carefully neutral. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus continued, leaning back in his chair like a king on a throne. "You're going to go back out to that terminal. You're going to get down on your knees in front of everyone who watched you disrespect me. You're going to clean that floor exactly the way I told you to. And then you're going to apologize. Publicly. And if I don't?" Lily's voice was quiet, but steady. Marcus's smile widened. "Then I fire you. And because I'm feeling generous, I'll also make a few phone calls. See, I know people at every major employer in Atlanta. Hotels, hospitals, office buildings. Anywhere someone like you might try to find work. One word from me and you'll be unemployable. Is that really the choice you want to make?" In the 6 weeks Lily had been undercover at this airport, she'd heard stories about Marcus from the other custodial staff. About Maria, who'd reported a supervisor for sexual harassment and found herself fired 3 days later for performance issues. About James, who'd tried to file a complaint about safety violations and ended up blacklisted from every airport job in the Southeast. About Kaisha, who'd worked here for 12 years before Marcus decided she was too old and found a reason to let her go without benefits. These were the people nobody protected. The ones who cleaned the bathrooms executives used, who emptied the trash from first-class lounges, who wiped down surfaces that thousands of travelers touched every day. They were essential but invisible. Necessary, but disposable. And Marcus Whitmore had built his entire career on keeping them that way. "I need this job," Lily said finally, and she made her voice shake just a little. Made herself sound defeated. "I have a daughter. I can't afford to lose this income." Marcus's expression shifted to satisfaction. He'd won, just like he always won. "Then we understand each other. Go back out there and do what I told you to do, and Lily? Make it convincing. Because I'll be watching." She turned toward the door, then paused. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Whitmore?" He waved his hand magnanimously, already turning his attention back to his computer. "What? Do you treat all your employees this way, or just the ones you think can't fight back?" His eyes snapped up to hers, something dangerous flashing across his face. "Get out of my office before I change my mind about giving you a second chance." Lily walked out past the security officers, past the administrative assistants who'd heard every word through the thin walls and wouldn't meet her eyes. past the other custodial workers taking their break in a cramped room that smelled like industrial cleaner and fear. She went back to her cart, which someone had moved to a storage area near Gate 47. The coffee spill had been cleaned up by the older Hispanic woman, who'd probably been terrified of becoming Marcus's next target if she didn't, but Lily didn't go back to the terminal. Instead, she pushed her cart into the supply closet, locked the door behind her, and pulled out her phone. Not the cheap prepaid phone that Lily the custodian carried, the other phone. The encrypted government-issued device that she kept hidden in a false bottom of her cleaning supply caddy. She pulled up the contact listed only as Director Chen and typed out a message. Situation escalated. Subject made direct threats and physical contact. Assault witnessed by 40 civilians. Video evidence secured. Recommend moving up timeline. How soon can we execute? The response came back in less than 2 minutes. Stand by. Do not break cover. Legal reviewing options. 72 hours maximum. 72 hours. 3 more days of being invisible, of swallowing her pride, of letting Marcus Whitmore think he'd won. Lily thought about her real daughter, Imani, who was actually staying with Lily's mother in D.C. while this assignment played out. She thought about the photo on her real desk at the FAA office, the one where 7-year-old Imani wore a junior inspector badge and a smile that could light up the world. What do you do, Mommy? Imani had asked once, trying to understand why her mother traveled so much, why she sometimes came home angry or sad or so tired she could barely speak. I make sure people are safe, baby, Lily had told her. I make sure the people who are supposed to protect others actually do their jobs. Like a superhero? Lily had laughed then, hugged her daughter close. No, sweetie. Superheroes are make-believe. I'm just someone who pays attention to things other people ignore. But standing in that supply closet, her arms still aching from Marcus's grip, her recording device full of evidence that would end careers and possibly result in criminal charges, Lily allowed herself a small, cold smile. Because Marcus Whitmore had made a critical mistake today. He'd stopped seeing her as just another invisible worker he could bully. He'd made it personal. He'd put his hands on her, threatened her, revealed exactly the kind of man he was, in front of witnesses and cameras. And in 72 hours, when federal agents walked into this airport with warrants and badges and the full authority of the United States government behind them, Marcus was going to learn something that his privilege and his connections and his uncle on the airport authority board couldn't protect him from. He was going to learn that the people you don't see are often the ones who destroy you. Lily put her phone away, straightened her uniform, and walked back out into the terminal. She had 3 more days to document every violation, every threat, every example of the systematic corruption that Marcus and his management team had built. 3 more days of being undercover. 3 more days of watching and waiting and collecting evidence. But what Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't possibly understand because his entire worldview was built on the assumption that people like Lily didn't matter, was that she'd already won. The coffee spill. The public humiliation. The threats in his office, all of it was now part of a federal investigation that would rip through this airport like a Category 5 hurricane. And Marcus Whitmore was standing directly in its path, completely unaware that the storm was coming. Day 1 after the incident, Marcus made sure everyone in the custodial department knew what happened. He called a mandatory morning meeting in the break room, a cramped space with flickering fluorescent lights and a coffee maker that hadn't worked in 3 months. Let me be crystal clear about the chain of command here, Marcus announced, standing at the front of the room while 20 tired workers sat on folding chairs or leaned against walls. His eyes found Lily in the back. When I give an instruction, I expect immediate compliance. Not questions. Not attitude. Compliance. He let the word hang in the air, toxic and heavy. Some of you seem to have forgotten that you work for me. That you're replaceable. That there are 50 people waiting for your job who would actually be grateful for the opportunity. His gaze swept across the room, landing on the older workers, the ones with gray hair and bad knees who'd given decades to this place. So if anyone else wants to test me the way our newest employee did yesterday, please. I'd love to clean house. After the meeting, Lily was approached in the hallway by the same Hispanic woman who'd cleaned up the coffee spill. She was maybe 60, with kind eyes and hands rough from years of chemical cleaners. "Mia," she whispered, glancing around to make sure they were alone. "You need to be careful. Marcus, he's done this before. Last year, a girl complained about him to HR. She said he touched her inappropriately. 2 weeks later, they found cocaine in her locker during a random search." She shook her head. "We all knew he planted it, but what could we do? She got arrested, lost her job, can't work in any airport now." "What's your name?" Lily asked gently. "Rosa. I've been here 18 years. She looked down at her worn shoes. "I keep my head down. I do my job. I don't make trouble. It's the only way to survive working for men like him." Lily wanted to tell her that survival shouldn't require swallowing your dignity. That 18 years of keeping your head down was 18 years too many. But she couldn't, not yet. "Thank you for the warning, Rosa," she said instead. "I'll be careful." Over the next 48 hours, Lily documented violations that made the health code failures look like minor infractions. She found evidence that Marcus's management company had been billing the airport authority for services never performed. Security camera footage mysteriously disappeared whenever there were incidents involving his staff. Maintenance requests from minority employees sat ignored for months, while complaints from the executive terminal got same-day attention. But it was what she discovered in the employee lockers that changed everything. Lily had been assigned to clean the staff break room on day 2 when she noticed something odd about the lockers. 3 of them, all belonging to employees who'd recently filed complaints against Marcus, had identical scratches around the locks. Fresh scratches, the kind that come from forced entry. She pulled out her phone and photographed the damage, then checked the break room's security camera. It had been deliberately angled away from the lockers, pointing instead at the empty wall. "Clever," she murmured to herself, cataloging the evidence. Marcus had a system. Complain about harassment or safety violations, and suddenly your locker gets randomly inspected. Suddenly contraband appears. Suddenly you're the one facing criminal charges instead of him. That afternoon, Rodriguez found her restocking paper towels in the men's restroom near gate 23. He checked to make sure they were alone before speaking. "Look, I don't know what's going on with you and Whitmore," he said, his voice low. "But you should know he called the police department yesterday, talked to someone in narcotics, asked about procedures for handling drug discoveries on airport property." Lily's stomach went cold. "He's planning to plant something." "I didn't say that." Rodriguez looked genuinely frightened. "I can't say that. I have a wife, 2 kids, and this job is all that keeps us afloat. But I've seen him do this before, and I can't watch it happen again without at least warning you." "Why are you telling me this?" He met her eyes, and she saw real pain there. "Because my little sister works custodial at Denver International. Because she's the same age as you, and I think about what I'd want someone to do if some predator with a title was targeting her." He glanced toward the door. "Check your locker every shift. Don't leave anything personal in there. And for God's sake, don't be alone with him." "Rodriguez," Lily said carefully, "if I told you that everything happening here was being documented by someone who could actually do something about it, would you be willing to give a statement?" His eyes widened slightly. "Who are you?" "Someone who pays attention to things other people ignore. Someone who's going to make sure Marcus Whitmore answers for every person he's destroyed." She paused. "But I need witnesses. People brave enough to tell the truth when it matters." Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My shift ends Thursday at 6 p.m. If someone official wanted to talk to me, I'd be available. Thursday." That was the day Director Chun had said they'd execute the operation. On day 3, Marcus summoned Lily to his office again. This time there was another man present. Tall, white, mid-50s, wearing a suit that screamed corporate lawyer. "Lily, this is Richard Chambers from our legal department," Marcus said, gesturing to the other man. "We've decided that given your recent behavioral issues, you need to sign an updated employment agreement." Chambers slid a document across the desk. Lily scanned it quickly, her legal training from her years at the FAA kicking in. It was a forced arbitration clause combined with an NDA that would prevent her from discussing anything she witnessed at the airport, including management practices and disciplinary procedures. In other words, a gag order designed to protect Marcus from lawsuits. This is a condition of continued employment, Chambers said in a voice devoid of emotion. Sign it, or your termination will be processed today. Lily picked up the pen, and both men relaxed slightly. They thought they'd won again. But instead of signing, she set the pen down and looked directly at Marcus. Before I sign anything, I need to report a safety violation I discovered this morning. Marcus's expression darkened. What are you talking about? The food service area near Gate 12 has refrigeration units operating at 48 degrees. Federal guidelines require food storage below 40 degrees. That's a serious health risk for the thousands of people eating from that location daily. That's not your concern, Marcus snapped. Actually, according to FAA regulations, any airport employee who witnesses a health or safety violation has a legal obligation to report it. Lily's voice was calm, professional. I'm simply following federal law. Chambers shot Marcus a look. Is there actually a problem with the refrigeration units? It's being handled, Marcus said through gritted teeth. Being handled or being ignored? Lily asked. Because according to the maintenance logs I've seen, that issue was reported 3 months ago, and no repairs were ever scheduled. How did you access maintenance logs? Marcus's face had gone red. That's confidential company information. They're posted in the staff break room, Lily said innocently. Right next to the schedule. Anyone can read them. The room went silent. Chambers was now looking at Marcus with open suspicion. If there really was a federal violation being ignored, and if it came out that the company knew about it, they could face massive fines. I'll have someone check the units immediately, Marcus said, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. Now sign the document. I'd like to have my own lawyer review it first, Lily said. That's my right, isn't it, Mr. Chambers? The lawyer's jaw tightened. Legally, she was correct. Forcing her to sign under duress would make the document invalid. You have 24 hours, Marcus said. Sign it by this time tomorrow, or you're terminated. Now get out. As Lily walked back toward the terminal, she pulled out her encrypted phone and sent a message to Director Chen. Subject attempting to force arbitration, NDA. Also threatened witness intimidation via planted evidence. Recommend execution tomorrow instead of Thursday. Multiple witnesses ready to provide statements. The response came within minutes. Approved. Operation greenlit for tomorrow 0600 hours. Federal agents briefed. Warrants secured. Well done, Inspector Santos. Lily felt something loosen in her chest. Tomorrow morning, when Marcus Whitmore walked into his office expecting another day of unchallenged power, he'd instead find federal agents with badges and handcuffs and questions he couldn't lawyer his way out of. That evening, Lily did something risky. She tracked down 5 current employees who'd been targeted by Marcus, including Rosa and a young black man named Deshaun who'd been fired last month after reporting safety violations. She met them individually, in parking lots and coffee shops far from the airport, and she told them the truth. My real name is Lily Santos. I'm a federal inspector with the FAA, and tomorrow morning we're executing a raid based on 6 weeks of evidence I've collected, but I need you to be ready to give statements. I need you to be brave one more time, Rosa cried. Deshaun laughed in disbelief and then hugged her. By midnight, she had written statements from all 5, detailing years of harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. The case was no longer just about health code violations. It was about systematic civil rights abuses, fraud, and a culture of fear that Marcus had built brick by brick, threat by threat, destroyed life by destroyed life. Lily barely slept that night. She lay in her hotel room, thinking about Imani, about all the Rosas and Deshaun's who'd suffered in silence, about the moment tomorrow when everything would finally break open. At 5:45 a.m., she put on her custodial uniform one last time. She clipped her fake ID badge to her shirt, knowing that in 15 minutes she'd be replacing it with her real credentials. At 5:58 a.m., she watched from the terminal as 3 black SUVs pulled up to the administrative entrance. At 6 a.m. exactly, 12 federal agents in windbreakers marked FAA Inspector. walked through the doors of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. And in his office, probably sipping his overpriced coffee and checking his email, Marcus Whitmore had less than 30 seconds left before his entire world collapsed. Marcus Whitmore was reviewing the quarterly budget report when his office door opened without a knock. He looked up, irritation already forming into words, and froze. 12 people in navy windbreakers marked FAA Office of Inspector General filled his doorway. The lead agent, a black woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expression that could cut glass, held up a badge and a folded document. Marcus Whitmore? I'm Special Agent Victoria Hunt, Federal Aviation Administration. We have a warrant to search these premises and seize all electronic devices and records related to airport operations, employee management, and health safety compliance. Marcus's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. I'm sorry, what? There must be some mistake. I'm the operations manager here. If there's an FAA inspection, you need to schedule through proper channels. This isn't an inspection, Mr. Whitmore. This is a federal investigation. Agent Hunt stepped into the office, and her team flowed around her like a well-trained unit. You have the right to remain silent, though we're not arresting you at this time. We're simply executing a search warrant. I suggest you cooperate. I want my lawyer. Marcus reached for his phone, but another agent was already disconnecting his desk computer. That's your right. But you should know that your lawyer is going to need to see these. Agent Hunt nodded to a younger agent who pulled up a tablet and turned it toward Marcus. 6 weeks of documented evidence collected by an undercover federal inspector. Would you like to see some highlights? The tablet screen showed Marcus's own office, filmed from an angle he didn't recognize. The timestamp read 3 days ago. His own voice played clearly. You're going to get down on your knees in front of everyone who watched you disrespect me. You're going to clean that floor exactly the way I told you to. Marcus's face went white. How did you? That's illegal surveillance. Actually, it's completely legal when conducted by a federal officer investigating credible reports of civil rights violations, health code fraud, and workplace discrimination. Agent Hunt's smile had no warmth in it. Keep watching. The video continued. Marcus threatening Lily's employment. Marcus describing how he'd blacklist her across the city. Marcus's hand gripping her arm hard enough to leave bruises. All of it captured in perfect clarity. That conversation was private, Marcus sputtered, but his voice had lost its authority. He was beginning to understand that this wasn't a mistake, wasn't a misunderstanding he could smooth over with connections and charm. Nothing is private when you're committing federal crimes, Mr. Whitmore. Agent Hunt gestured to one of her team members. Bring her in. The office door opened again, and Lily walked in. But she wasn't wearing her custodial uniform anymore. She wore a charcoal suit, low heels, and around her neck hung an official badge that read, Federal Aviation Administration Senior Health and Safety Inspector Lily Santos. Marcus actually stood up from his chair, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and finally landing on pure rage. You were the cleaning woman. You lied. You committed fraud. I conducted an undercover investigation authorized by the FAA Inspector General's office, Lily said calmly. Every action I took was legal and sanctioned. Can you say the same about yours? She pulled out a file from the briefcase another agent handed her. 6 weeks ago, this office received 3 separate whistleblower complaints about systematic health code violations, employee discrimination, and fraudulent billing practices at this airport. The complaints came from workers too terrified to use their real names, because they knew what happened to people who challenged you. Lily opened the file, spreading documents across Marcus's desk. So we sent someone you'd never see coming. Someone you'd dismiss as beneath your notice. Someone who could document everything while you were too busy feeling superior to realize you were being watched. Marcus's hands were shaking now. My uncle sits on the airport authority board. My family has lawyers that will bury you and this entire investigation. Your uncle resigned from the board 30 minutes ago. Agent Hunt interrupted. Right after we served him with a subpoena regarding his knowledge of the fraudulent billing schemes. As for your lawyers, they're going to be very busy defending you against multiple federal charges. Another agent approached with a laptop. Ma'am, we found the digital files.
Everything matches Inspector Santos' reports.
Lily walked around Marcus's desk, standing where she'd stood 3 days ago when he'd threatened to destroy her life. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that Marcus actually stepped back. Let me tell you what we found, Marcus. She pulled up images on the laptop.
Refrigeration units in 5 food service areas operating at unsafe temperatures.
You received 16 reports about this over 6 months and ignored every single one. That's negligent endangerment of public health. She clicked to the next image.
Maintenance records showing that ventilation systems haven't been serviced in 9 months, despite federal requirements for quarterly inspections.
But your company billed the airport authority for those inspections anyway.
That's fraud. Another click. Security camera footage that mysteriously gets deleted whenever there are incidents involving minority employees. Footage that somehow always works fine when you need it to investigate thefts or disputes.
That's evidence tampering. Click. Documentation of 12 employees who filed
complaints against you or your supervisors.
And 12 employees who were subsequently fired or forced to resign after drugs or stolen property mysteriously appeared in their lockers.
That's conspiracy and retaliation. Marcus's face had gone from white to gray.
You can't prove I planted anything. Actually, we can. Lily nodded to Agent Hunt, who opened another file.
Your security access logs show you entering the employee locker area at times when you had no operational reason to be there.
Times that coincide perfectly with the discovery of contraband.
We also have testimony from a security officer who witnessed you accessing lockers without authorization.
Rodriguez, Marcus breathed. That lying. Officer Rodriguez is a decorated military veteran with 15 years of exemplary service, Agent Hunt said sharply.
And he's not the only witness. We have 5 former employees ready to testify. We have current employees who documented your harassment.
We have maintenance workers who'll confirm you ordered them to falsify safety reports. She stepped closer to Marcus, and despite being a foot shorter than him, she seemed to tower over his collapsing authority. You built a system where people were too afraid to speak up because you controlled their livelihoods, their futures, their ability to feed their families. You thought that made you powerful.
It just made you sloppy,
Lily added.
Because when people are that afraid, when the abuse is that systematic, eventually someone notices.
Eventually someone cares enough to do something about it.
The office door opened again.
And this time it was Richard Chambers, the corporate lawyer who tried to force Lily to sign the NDA. His expression suggested he'd already been briefed on the situation. Don't say anything else, Marcus, Chambers said quickly. Not one more word without counsel present. Smart advice, Agent Hunt said.
Because in about 30 seconds, every major news outlet in Atlanta is going to receive a press release about this investigation. CNN has cameras in the terminal already. Channel 2 Action News is setting up in the main concourse. And social media is about to learn all about the operations manager who tried to force a federal inspector to lick a floor. Marcus's legs seemed to give out. He sat down heavily in his leather chair, the chair he'd sat in while threatening countless workers, while building his little empire of fear and corruption.
Those videos from the terminal, he whispered. The passengers who recorded everything are already viral, Lily confirmed. 20 million views and counting. Hashtags trending nationwide.
Your face is everywhere, Marcus. And now everyone knows exactly who you are. She leaned down so they were eye level.
You told me I was replaceable, that I was nobody. That people like me don't matter. Her voice was steady, but there was steel underneath.
But here's what you never understood.
The people you don't see? We're the ones who see everything. And we remember. Agent Hunt gestured to 2 agents by the door. Marcus Whitmore, you're not under arrest at this time, but you are required to surrender all electronic devices and remain available for questioning.
Your employment with this facility is terminated effective immediately.
And you're banned from all airport property pending the conclusion of our investigation. This is insane, Marcus said, but his voice had no power left in it.
Over some health code violations? Over employee complaints? Over a pattern of civil rights abuses, fraud,
and corruption that endangered public safety and destroyed innocent lives, Agent Hunt corrected.
The health violations alone carry fines up to $5 million. The fraud charges could mean prison time. And the civil lawsuits from the employees you targeted?
Those are just beginning. As agents began boxing up files and disconnecting equipment, Lily pulled out her phone and showed Marcus one final image.
It was the photo of her real office at the FIA quarters. Awards on the wall. Commendations. A picture of 7-year-old Amani in a junior inspector badge.
I didn't need this job, Marcus. I have a master's degree in public health and 10 years investigating corruption.
I make more in a month than you paid me in 6 weeks of pretending to push a mop. She put her phone away.
I just needed you to show me who you really were.
And you couldn't help yourself. Rosa appeared in the doorway then, still in her custodial uniform but standing straighter than Lily had ever seen her.
Behind her were Deshawn, 3 other former employees, and Officer Rodriguez in his security uniform. These are the people whose lives you tried to destroy, Lily said to Marcus. They're here to give their official statements.
And if you're watching this story unfold and thinking about the times you stayed silent when someone abused their power, consider this your sign to speak up. Sometimes justice needs witnesses. Subscribe to the channel to see how the people Marcus dismissed as invisible finally made him see
exactly what he'd done. Marcus looked at the faces of people he'd terrorized, threatened, and discarded.
People who'd survived his cruelty and come back to testify against him. And for the first time in his entitled, protected, consequence-free life, Marcus Whitmore understood what it felt like to be powerless.
Get him out of here, Agent Hunt said quietly.
As agents escorted a stunned Marcus Whitmore out of his office, past his shocked colleagues, through a terminal where CNN cameras were already filming, Lily stood at the window overlooking the runways.
She watched planes take off into the morning sky, carrying thousands of passengers who'd never know how close they'd come to.
Serious illness from the violations Marcus had ignored. But they were safe now. The evidence was secured.
The pattern was documented.
And the invisible workers who kept this airport running finally had someone who'd listen to their truth.
3 months later, Lily stood at a podium in the Atlanta Federal Building,
addressing a room full of journalists, airport employees, and federal officials. The press conference had been scheduled to announce the findings of the investigation, but it had become something much larger.
The investigation into Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport's private management company has resulted in 17 federal indictments, she announced, reading from the official report.
Marcus Whitmore has been charged with fraud, conspiracy to tamper with evidence, civil rights violations, and negligent endangerment of public safety.
His company, Whitmore Aviation Services, has been stripped of its airport management contract and faces fines exceeding $12 million. Camera flashes popped. Reporters scribbled notes. In the back row, Rosa sat between Deshawn and Officer Rodriguez, all 3 wearing expressions of quiet satisfaction.
Additionally, we've identified and contacted 43 former employees who were wrongfully terminated or forced to resign.
The airport authority has established a $5 million settlement fund to compensate these individuals for lost wages and damages. Lily paused, making eye contact with the workers in the audience.
This case was never just about health code violations. It was about a system that protected abusers and punished victims. A system that treated essential workers as disposable. That system ended today. After the press conference, Lily found Rosa waiting in the hallway. The older woman's eyes were red, but she was smiling.
They called me this morning, Rosa said, her voice thick with emotion. The settlement. It's enough to pay off my mortgage. After 18 years of barely surviving, I can actually breathe. She grabbed Lily's hands. You gave me back my dignity. You gave all of us back our dignity. You never lost it, Lily said firmly.
Marcus tried to take it, but dignity isn't something someone else can give or take away.
You just needed someone to witness what he'd done to you and care enough to act. Deshawn approached next, and Lily barely recognized him.
The defeated young man she'd met 3 months ago had been replaced by someone standing tall,
wearing a security uniform from a different airport. Denver International hired me, he said, grinning.
Full benefits, union protection, and they made it clear that whistleblowers are protected, not punished.
I start next week. His grin faded slightly. I'm testifying at Marcus's trial.
They said my testimony about the planted evidence is critical to the conspiracy charges. Are you ready for that? Lily asked gently. I spent a year thinking my life was over because I told the truth about safety violations. I lost my job, couldn't get another one, almost lost my apartment. Deshawn's jaw set with determination. Yeah, I'm ready. I want to look him in the eye and tell a jury exactly what he did to me and everyone else he thought was beneath him. Officer Rodriguez had been promoted to head of terminal security at Hartsfield, one of many changes the new management company had implemented. He'd also become the airport's liaison for the employee protection program that had been established in the wake of the scandal. We've had 23 reports in 3 months, he told Lily over coffee after the press conference. 23 employees who finally felt safe enough to report harassment, discrimination, safety violations. Things that would have been buried under the old system. He shook his head in amazement. You changed the entire culture of this place just by being willing to see what everyone else ignored. The trial of Marcus Whitmore became national news. His lawyers argued that he'd simply been doing his job, maintaining standards, that he'd been entrapped by federal overreach. But the evidence was overwhelming. The videos, the testimony, the documented pattern of abuse spanning years. Employee after employee took the stand and told their stories. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Marcus was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $2 million in restitution to his victims. His professional reputation was destroyed beyond repair. The uncle who'd sat on the airport authority board was forced to resign in disgrace. The political connections that had protected Marcus for so long evaporated overnight as everyone scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. But for Lily, the real victory came 6 months after the raid, when she walked into a community center in southwest Atlanta for a town hall about workers' rights. The room was packed with custodial staff, food service workers, baggage handlers, all the invisible people who kept airports and hotels and office buildings running. When Lily was introduced, the entire room stood and applauded. Some were crying. These weren't people who'd worked at Hartsfield. These were workers from across the city who'd heard her story and found hope in it. An older black woman approached the microphone during the Q&A session. My supervisor makes racist comments every single day. He says if I don't like it, I can leave. I've worked at the same hotel for 22 years, and I'm terrified that if I complain, I'll lose everything. Her voice cracked. How did you find the courage to stand up when you knew what it might cost? Lily thought about that question for a long moment before answering. I didn't start out brave, she said honestly. I stood in that terminal with coffee on the floor and a man telling me to lick it clean, and every instinct I had screamed at me to run away, to protect myself, to stay small and invisible. But then I thought about my daughter Imani. I thought about what lesson I'd be teaching her if I accepted that treatment. If I let someone with power tell me I was worthless. She looked around the room at all those tired, scared, hopeful faces. You find courage when you realize that your silence protects abusers and your voice protects the next person. When you understand that the system only works for bullies if good people are too afraid to challenge it. She paused. And you find courage when you remember that you're not alone. That there are people like me, like the federal agents who executed that warrant, like the journalists who covered the story, who will listen and act when you speak your truth. The woman nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm going to file a complaint tomorrow, and I'll help you, Rodriguez said from the back of the room. He'd come to the town hall to offer support. We're setting up a hotline for workers who need guidance on reporting violations safely. You don't have to do this alone. That night, Lily video called Imani, who was back home in D.C. with Lily's mother. Her daughter's face filled the screen, gap-toothed smile, bright and curious. Mommy, Grandma showed me the news story about you. You were on TV. Imani bounced excitedly. They said you're a hero. I'm not a hero, baby. I just did my job. But you helped people who were being hurt. That's what heroes do. Imani's expression turned serious, the way 7-year-olds do when they're processing something important. The man who was mean to you, he went to jail? He did. Because what he did was wrong. And there are consequences for treating people badly, even if you think you're powerful enough to get away with it. Good. Imani nodded with the absolute moral certainty of childhood. When I grow up, I want to help people like you do. I want to make sure bad people can't hurt good people anymore. Lily felt her throat tighten with emotion.
Then you will, baby. You absolutely will.
A year after the raid, the FAA promoted Lily to Regional Director of Workplace Safety Investigations. Her first act was to establish a program training inspectors in undercover investigative techniques. Her second was to create a protected channel for airport workers nationwide to report violations without fear of retaliation.
She received hundreds of letters from workers across the country.
From custodians who'd been sexually harassed. From baggage handlers who'd reported safety violations and been fired. From people who'd spent years being invisible, being told they didn't matter, being treated as disposable by people in positions of power.
One letter came from Marcus Whitmore's former personal assistant,
a young woman who'd watched him abuse employees for 3 years and said nothing because she needed her job.
"I'm ashamed that I stayed silent," she wrote.
"I told myself I was powerless, that speaking up would only cost me everything and change nothing.
But watching you stand up to him, watching the entire system he built collapse because one person refused to be silent,
it showed me that we're only powerless when we accept that lie. I've left that job and I'm working with an advocacy group for workplace rights now. Thank you for showing me that the invisible people are only invisible when we choose not to see them."
Lily kept that letter in her desk drawer, along with dozens of others.
Reminders that what she'd done mattered not just because Marcus went to prison or because health violations were corrected, but because she'd proven something fundamental to everyone who'd felt powerless. She'd proven that the system could be challenged, that bullies could be held accountable, that speaking truth to power wasn't feudal martyrdom, but the beginning of real change.
2 years after the raid, Rosa retired from custodial work with her mortgage paid off and enough savings to travel for the first time in her life. Deshawn had been promoted to supervisor at Denver International and was working on a degree in aviation management.
Officer Rodriguez had become a national spokesperson for airport worker protection programs, and Marcus Whitmore sat in federal prison, his empire of cruelty reduced to a cautionary tale about what happens when you build power on the oppression of people you think don't matter. Lily thought about him sometimes, but not with satisfaction or revenge. She thought about him as a reminder of why her work mattered.
Why every investigation, every undercover operation, every moment of standing up to abusers was worth the risk. Because somewhere right now, in an airport or hotel or office building,
there was someone being told they were worthless, someone being threatened into silence. Someone who believed they had to accept mistreatment because they needed their job more than they needed their dignity. And Lily's job was to make sure those people knew they had options, that they had power, that they mattered. She stood at the window of her office in the Atlanta Federal Building, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. On her desk sat a photo of Amani, now 9 years old and already talking about becoming an inspector like her mother. Next to it was her FAA badge, the real one, the one that represented years of fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves.
Her phone buzzed with a message from Director Chen. New case. Major hotel chain.
Multiple whistleblower complaints about discrimination and health violations. Interested?
Lily smiled and typed back.
When do I start?
Because this was the work. Not the dramatic raids or the press conferences or the viral videos, though those had their place.
The real work was showing up day after day, investigation after investigation, for the people everyone else had been trained not to see.
The invisible workers who cleaned the floors executives walked on, who emptied the trash in first-class lounges, who kept the machinery of modern life running while being told they were replaceable, disposable, worthless.
Lily had learned something profound during those 6 weeks undercover at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. She'd learned that invisibility could be a weapon just as powerful as a badge. That the people society trained you to ignore were often the ones who saw everything. And that real power wasn't about having authority over others. It was about using whatever authority you had to protect those who had none.
Marcus Whitmore had tried to force her to lick a floor to prove he was powerful. Instead, he'd proven that cruelty always contains the seeds of its own destruction. That abusers who think they're untouchable are often just one witness, one person who refuses to be silent, one documented truth away from losing everything.
If you're watching this and you've ever felt powerless against someone who abused their authority, remember Lily's story. Remember that systems of oppression only work when good people stay silent. That your voice matters, your truth matters, and there are people who will listen and act if you're brave enough to speak. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of ordinary people who refused to accept injustice and changed everything because of it. The sun set completely, and Lily gathered her things to head home. Tomorrow she'd start a new investigation, step into a new undercover role, become invisible again so she could see what others missed. But tonight, she'd go home and call her daughter and remember why she did this work. Why she'd stood in that terminal with Marcus Whitmore's hand on her arm and chosen truth over silence. Why she'd risk everything to prove that the people society teaches us to ignore are the ones who deserve our attention most. Because in the end, Marcus Whitmore had been right about one thing: Lily was nobody special. She was just someone who paid attention to things other people ignored. And sometimes that's exactly what changes the world.